Well, welcome everyone. Today we're going to talk about our environmental considerations for houseplants. I want to introduce myself. I'm John Porter, the Urban Agriculture Program Coordinator with Nebraska Extension, and I'm really happy to be here talking about houseplants. So my job focuses mainly on fruits and vegetables, but I am a houseplant aficionado, so I'm glad I get to talk about that part of my passion as well. And my co-presenter, David, introduce yourself.
I'm David Lott. I'm the horticulture educator with Nebraska Extension based in North Platte in the Lincoln County Extension Office. So I'm in West Central Nebraska and I work primarily in West Central and in the Panhandle. I grew up loving house plants and going to the greenhouse as a kid in our local little town in Kansas. So learned many of them from people over time and have taken on some that are new challenges and like to share that information.
Thank you for that. And actually, before we get started, we have two more colleagues that have hopped on. I missed them earlier. Jody and Phoebe can also just say a quick word. They'll help answer questions as well. So if you want to just say hello. Or not, just hide in the background. That's fine too.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm doing this from my phone. So my name's Jody Green. I was not supposed to be called out because I am not an expert at anything that's being talked about today. I'm the entomologist that work with these amazing people, and I'm just excited to be watching them. So I hope you guys all have a good time learning. I know I will.
Well, if we have a difficult bug question that we can't answer, you're here as our backup.
Hi guys, I'll introduce myself quick too. I am Phoebe. I work in Buffalo County as the horticulture aide, so I'll just be helping out in the chat boxes with some questions. I hope you guys enjoy the presentation.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. We're going to talk about houseplants and environmental considerations. So what are we going to talk about today? So we're going to learn about how the native habitats of houseplants contribute to their environmental condition needs, and also how some practical methods to alter those environments at home. Let me reshare there. And also, we're going to answer your questions. And so you see, this is one of my prized plants that I didn't realize that you have. That was sort of sitting in the background that a lot of people are coveting. This is my Monstera albo. It's right here behind me as well. If you might have seen it if you're in Omaha or Nebraska in the Omaha World Herald, people wanted to buy cuttings, and I sold 5 cuttings. So 5 leaves, 5 nodes from that, and I made $675 off of 5 leaves. So houseplants are hot right now, and that's really interesting. So really, when we're thinking about houseplants, we want to think a little bit about behind the science and why we have all of these conditions that we have to meet whenever we're growing these houseplants. So we have to think about the approximate condition of their native habitat whenever we're deciding how to care for them. And we also know that plants thrive when their conditions stay relatively stable. So whenever they're, the environment doesn't change a lot, the temperature can fluctuate, the humidity can fluctuate a little bit, but you don't want to have huge fluctuations in their environment. So case in point, thinking about when things, where things grow. So this is a picture that I took in real life. This is in Costa Rica. And this is what people were talking about, they thought was the tractor seat plant, but this is because this sort of looks like a tractor seat. But this is a Monstera deliciosa. So it's a giant plant. I have one of these at home. It's also giant. I couldn't fit it in this room. And so it grows in that more tropical, that's where it's happy. And so we have to think about approximating that whenever we're keeping our house plants happy at home. But really the choice is yours. And so we see this a lot of times if you buy house plants that require lots of alteration to your home environment. and you're not willing to do that or not interested in doing that, then maybe that's not the plant for you. So you either have to think, am I going to alter my home environment for my plants, which can be difficult for some plants, or am I going to get plants that thrive in my home environment? I'm sort of in the middle here. There are some plants that I like that, I want to keep happy and healthy. But, I don't like to baby a lot of plants. So there are some plants like, we have a calathea here on the left-hand side that, they can be particularly difficult because they like a lot of humidity, that they can be difficult to keep happy. And so that's one of them that I haven't really come to an agreement with yet. And so we have to think about how do we take care of our environment to make it comfortable for us. If there's a plant that needs 80% humidity and 90 degrees, that's probably not something I want to grow in my house. Maybe I can create a microclimate for it, but I have to think about how do I replicate what it wants and keep me happy and my electric bill and my water bill happy as well. So we're going to talk about a little bit about lighting first. So I'm going to talk about the actual science behind it and the native habitat. And then David will finish up by talking about some things that you can do at home. So this is another Monstera deliciosa. This one is in my dining room. And so you can see it's got some grow lights behind it. It has a nice window there. The one on the back wall behind it is a south-facing window. The one to the left of it is an east-facing window. So it gets plenty of light in there, even with some grow light, just because it's back in the corner. You'll also notice in front of it, that is a whole house humidifier that humidifies up to 4,000 square feet. So it's been happier since we got that. And so we can alter our environments that way, but we're going to talk about lighting first. And so we think about where do the plants grow and what lights do they need? If you go out walking in the forest here, there are plants that grow in the understory. There are the trees. There are plants that grow out in the full sun. And that's really where these light requirements sort of come from. Where do these plants grow in their native habitat? So a low light plant might be an understory plant or one that's used to being more shaded. A highlight plant is more from an open area. And even in our homes, a bright sunny window provides only a fraction of the light that a plant gets outside in the full sun. And so our high to moderate lighting need plants may need some supplemental lighting. And so we can talk about that in a bit. So if we think about our home environment and our windows, this is, someone's set up and there's bright light coming from a west or a south facing window on the left side of this screen. And so you can see that there's bright light and bright indirect light. And the farther you get away from the windows, the less light you have until you get back to that low light. And you can see here that there are plants, bright indirect light. We have our fiddly fig in there. We have our monstera in the bright indirect light, all the way back to the low light, our sansevieria and our ZZ plant. I saw a question about, do I notice greater humidity? And yes, I not only get a humidifier for the plants, but also for when the heat runs a lot, your sinuses dry out. I have sinus problems, and so that helps a lot too. Okay, I don't know what my screen is doing. It's being weird. I want to reshare.
This is a great diagram for people to see where the placement looks like, because we talk about low, medium, and high, and John's graphic here shows us where in the house and where in relationship to the windows where you will find low, medium, and high, which is really important. People usually see something at a retail store or a nursery and they fall in love with the plant, and then they got to figure out where they need to put it. And that's one of the biggest challenges with environment. We select the plant, bring it home, get excited, and then now what? So that's a common thing to do. I've done it before, and then I have to go research and figure it out.
Exactly. So now I'm back on track here. I don't know what happened there. And so when we're shopping for lights, I'm going to actually refer you back. Our colleague Scott, who you met earlier, did a great talk on light selection. He focused mainly on for seed starting back in early February, but did a great job of talking about how to select lights. And we'll have a link. It's on our YouTube channel that we can share there. So so I'll refer you back to that. I'm going to steal a few slides from him just to talk some general. So when we're talking about lights, we used to buy them in watts. You would get a 40-watt bulb, a 60-watt bulb. Those are for incandescent bulbs. But now we have lots of different types of bulbs, and LEDs are becoming popular, compact fluorescents. And so we're talking about lumens, which is the actual light output, not the energy usage. And so if we're shopping for lights now, we're looking for the brightness in lumens is what we're going to look for. And so for typically, if we're looking at some of these different types of light bulbs, incandescent bulbs, compact fluorescents, the LEDs, LEDs use less energy, but actually have more lumens. And so you get more light for the energy that you use. The light bulbs are usually a little more expensive to begin with, but they use a lot less electricity, and they're also, they last a lot longer. They have a much longer lifespan. So it's much cheaper to operate those in the long run. Even a nice plant light, an LED plant light that we'll talk about, can be cheaper overall in the long run. So if we look at the number of lumens, bright light, a plant is about 60,000 lumens. Medium is 25 to 50. Low light is 6,000 to 12,000. The sun at high noon, if you're outside, is 125,000 lumens. And so we talk about these different types of light, and David will go into them in a little different detail a little later on. We also look at, if we're buying a light, the farther away from the light, the more or the less light you have. So it's a diminishing return. And so the lumens are divided by the distance squared. So if the light is 1 foot away from the plant, so it's still 1,000 lumen bulb, 1 foot away is 1,000 lumens. 2 feet away though, so that's actually only 250 lumens. 3 feet, it goes down to 111. And so we see less and less light as we get farther and farther away from the plant. And so we see a lot of plant lights, that you might get them and they might be far away, but they actually need to be very close to that plant to get the ultimate effect. And we'll talk about that a bit. And then we do talk about the color. So we're talking about photosynthetically active radiation. This is the spectrum of light that we see. So I shared that picture of my Monstera. A lot of fast production type of agriculture uses just the red and blue LEDs because that's what the plants use the most. In the sort of 400, 450 nanometer range, which is what we're talking about here. That's the actual length of the wavelength. It's on this scale here. So in this scale right here, and then sort of like the 650 to 700 range up here. So the length of the wavelength of light. So that's what plants mainly use, is those two. You can see those two peaks sort of here. Those are, if you're growing things like hydroponic lettuce or microgreens, producers use a lot of those because they don't need to keep the plant healthy for a long period of time. And that reduces their energy usage because they don't have to produce all the spectrums of light. What I'll say is that those can be good supplemental lights for houseplants, but if you're growing them in a place where that's the main light that they get, like if it's in a dark room, some people even have like a basement, area where they have a shelf or a rack. You want to provide a full white light or more spectrums of colors than the red or blue, because you need more of them. There's more of them that are taken up by the plant. Even a little bit of, we didn't used to think green was usable by plants, but some research in microgreens are showing better microgreen growth if you add like a few blue LEDs to the red and blue ones, or a few green LEDs to the red and blue ones. Typically, when we're thinking about the color, we think about the blue sort of with the vegetative growth, and then the red more with the floral growth. But of course, they all contribute to energy production in the plant. And that's what we're focusing on. And so we do look at the spectrum, but if you're doing houseplants, you're having them under lights for a long time, you do want to provide more of a full spectrum of light. And so we have the Kelvin scale, which is more the temperature of light. This doesn't, so this nanometer scale, the rainbow scale, and this are not really related. These don't sort of interact. So we're looking at the actual brightness, color of the light. And so we're wanting to focus sort of like in this middle range here. So you can actually see, if you look at a light bulb, you might see this Kelvin on there as well. And so you want to, you'll look for plant lights that more are red, they resemble more of like the sunshine. So you want this middle range, like the 4,000 to 7,000 type Kelvin. You don't want anything in the extremes whenever you're looking for light. I know that was very brief. Scott did a really much better job of explaining that, and we'll tell you where to go find the YouTube channel later on, so you can see his talk that he did earlier in the spring. So very briefly, temperature is one of the things that we think about with plants, but we can't really alter our home environment for plants, that really like hot or cool temperatures, because we're keeping ourselves comfortable. But we can do, some microclimates. Plant temperatures range from, they're vast. They go from near freezing when we have sort of plants that grow on the tundra or in areas like that, to near tropical heat. And temperature affects plant growth. It doesn't affect photosynthesis. Light affects photosynthesis. So the production of energy is not temperature dependent, but respiration, the plant using the sugars that it creates is, and that's what gives us growth. And so we can be actually creating food when it's cool and bright, but we're not going to use that and grow. And so that's why light levels reduce in the winter, and also temperatures reduce in the winter. And that's why, even our house plants slow down or stop growing during the winter. It's because it is usually less light for photosynthesis. And also, even if we're keeping it, between 68 and 72 degrees in the house, it's cooler than it would be outside, where it would be much warmer, or in a tropical area. You can, I have seen some people erect like a mini greenhouse in their basement where they're heating it and providing humidity. And so you can do that. You can create like little hot grow rooms or humid grow rooms. But that is, that's sort of like the big houseplant fan, that's not, sort of just the hobbyist. And also putting plants that will tolerate it outside will really help growth. If they take bright sun, if they like the high heat and the high humidity, you can put them outside and they will grow faster out there, because it is much warmer and there is much more light. And so you can do that. There are some plants though, if they're not the highlight plants, or if they dry out really fast, and we'll talk about that in a minute, you might not want to put them outside because of those wild swings in temperatures and heat and light. Can dry them out and damage them, cause leaf burn, and kill them. And so you want to watch out for that. So it's not the heat, it's the humidity. And when we talk about humidity, one of the things that humidity does is affects water loss. And we'll talk about that in a second, what that really means. But there are leaf adaptations due to climate and the natural habitat that affect transpiration rates. And transpiration is where the plant takes in and loses water through its pores and its leaves, and we'll talk about that. There are some plants that use a special form of photosynthesis to avoid water stress. We'll talk about those. And there are plants with adaptations to conserve water needs at higher humidity levels. So if we have plants that typically grow in very humid areas, they may not have the ability to withstand drying out. And so those are some of those things that we struggle with in our houses, that they dry out very easily, and so they don't have those adaptations that can help them. So plants lose water in a few different ways. Mainly it's transpiration, where the pores open, called stomata, and they transpire. So it lets out water vapor, because the stomata opens so it can take in carbon dioxide and let off oxygen during the photosynthetic process. But also they lose water vapor. That is what actually lets them pull water up from the roots. So we have to have that process. It's like a big straw pulling stuff up. We also see water loss from evaporation from the soil. So when it's dry in the air and the atmosphere, we actually lose water from the pot, because it evaporates out of the soil. And the smaller the pot, the less volume of soil and water in there, and the faster it evaporates and reduces to a point where the plant may not like it. And so we can think about us losing water mainly through transpiration in the plant, but also the soil does lose water when it's dry in the atmosphere. And so, we can turn that into a house plant if we need to help with that visualization. There are some adaptations that some plants make in order to conserve water, and they don't need as a humid as environment because of this. So they can have the waxy cuticle, where they have a really tough covering. They can have trichome, so they can be like a hairy leaf that sort of keeps airflow from hitting the leaf and reducing water loss. They can have really tiny leaves that they have fewer of those stomata, those pores, so they don't lose as much water. Or they can not grow leaves at all. They can turn them into spines and be like this cactus. And so it's really, the cactus is that really waxy, hard surface. And so there are not a lot of leaves to lose the stomata from, or the water from there as well. And then I told you that there's a special class of plants that do a special type of photosynthesis called CAM, crassulatic acid metabolism. You don't need to know that. But this is a lot of succulents or plants from arid climates. And because they don't want to open those pores during the day when it's really, really hot, or maybe they're in a humid climate, but they don't have roots. There are a lot of our plants that sort of just hang out in trees, that they don't really have roots to take up water. A lot of them have this form of photosynthesis too. So the stomata only open at night, and so the photosynthesis actually happens in a different way without needing the carbon dioxide all there. It's a different form. And so some of the common ones that have this: jade, aeonium, echeveria, kalanchoe, sedum, pineapples, tillandsia, so those are the air plants, cacti, orchids, agave, and hoya. So hoya that one is the Hindu rope hoya, which if I were to turn my camera just a little bit that way, there's one hanging right there, right in my window. But we can have those different types of plants. So they have a different type of photosynthesis because they either are from that arid environment where they don't open, or they don't have roots where they take up water, and so they don't want to dry out during the day. And so you can see that they behave a little bit differently. This Hoya really looks like a really big tropical plant. You would think it needs lots of water, but they're really easy to overwater. And so it stands to reason that plants require high humidity are typically tropical and often from rainforests. They're epiphytic. So like an orchid, most of the orchids grow on the side of a tree. They don't have roots that go into the soil. The air plants, tillandsia, are really epiphytic. They typically don't have much. They just hang out there and soak up humidity or whatever. And so the plants that typically are from those really rainforesty areas that are very tropical, those are the ones that need really high humidity, and the ones that have limited root structures, they typically need higher humidity. You know, so like hanging over my shoulder here, I have one of those stag staghorn ferns hanging there. We're coming to an agreement as well. We're not 100% on speaking terms, but it's okay. You know, so the famously fickle calatheas, the rattlesnake calatheas, are very dramatic. Or the dramatic droopy Fittonia, the nerve plant. You know, the calatheas are from the Brazilian rainforest. So if you think about the Amazon, same with the nerve plant, the Fittonia, it's from a Peruvian rainforest. If you ever had one of those, like if it, you know, needs one drop of water, it will like totally wilt. And so, you know, we have lots of different plants. I have some of my collection here. You know, a lot of these are very tropical, you know, so we have this philodendron here, Birkin. You know, a lot of these things are fairly tropical. One of the things, one of the plants that a lot of people get wrong. So here's, you know, we have the holiday cactus collection, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter. This one is a Christmas. And most people think it's a cactus. It comes from the desert. I need to keep it dry. These are actually epiphytes that grow on trees in rainforests or in tropical areas. So they actually need much more moisture than a lot of people give them. And you know, I struggle with some plants because I don't do a lot of changing of my environment. I have some humidifiers, etc. But I had one calathea that was going okay. I can't remember the name of it. Here's my bird nest fern. Someone was asking about one earlier. And it was doing okay. And then we got that really cold snap and we were conserving energy. So we turned off our humidifiers and our heat ran constantly. And so I will share with you, you know, just to let you know that even the experts struggle. This is my calathea right here. So I can stop sharing for a second so you can see. It's nice and crispy. And so it'll go in the trash. And so, you know, that's a little bit of the science behind it. I'm going to turn it over to David. Please type your questions in the chat as we go along. So I can answer questions now that I wasn't able to before. And I will reshare so David can share now.
Okay, thank you, John. Like I said, we find things that we fall in love with either at a retail store or a greenhouse and nursery or online, because you can buy plants online. It's for those who want to find more than what's available locally. So then we have to figure, well, how do we make this work? So actually do this process backwards, just because we have something we fell in love with and now we're going to bring it home and make it work. And one thing that we talk about with plants in the interior landscape is what my college class was. It's something that can't be like furniture. You've got to match it to the right environment. You just can't say, oh, here's a wonderful plant and I want to put it right here. The environment needs to be right for it to succeed and to thrive. And even with some of the best attempts, it can be a real challenge, especially when people give you plants or you receive plants and you need to know what kind of care it takes. And sometimes we're really at a loss. So hopefully this is more of a practical setting to help you find some answers to those questions. Okay, can you advance the slide? Okay. So the thing what we need to do is we need to identify what's low, medium, and high. So we're going to split those into those needs, and we have a NEB guide here. I've got a screenshot and a link for you to pull later for reference on what is categorized into low, medium, and high. Lots of the plants are tagged low, medium, and high needs, even the basic ones. So that does give you a little bit of an idea. I know one of the big questions we get come from people that receive plants after a funeral ceremony. And people pick them because they're colorful, they're pretty, you know, they you know, are sentiment. Like Kathleen said, that it's a reminder of someone else or a family member or a loved one. So now you have to work with it to make it have some success. And that can be a challenge. So we want to match the available light to the house plant choice unless we are doing some supplemental lighting, for instance. Okay, next slide. So this is the NEB guide that I'm referencing here. This is one that was written several years ago and updated on how growing house plants successfully. It's a very basic 4-page NEB guide that gives you the basic pieces that you need. So it's G2205, and there's a link in the back of this presentation. So if you download the presentation, then you can get the link, or you can call any one of us. We can send that link to you. Okay, next slide. Because that's just a screenshot. So here are 2 of the tables that are in that NEB guide in the back of it. And there's not pictures, but there's great information on here that gives you, the low light, locate more than 8 feet from windows, no direct light. This is where it's kind of pulling it in. So this is based on light. It's not based on humidity. So remember, we got to kind of play with that a little bit. And temperature, like John says, already as referenced, if you have low light, you're not getting enough light to your plants, they cannot go through photosynthesis. And if you keep your house warm, like we're going to during the winter, it's going to respirate out. And so that can be kind of a mismatch. So on your left side here, table 1, these are some of your low light plants. And there are more plants than this list for sure that are low light plants, but these are a lot of the common ones that people have or you hear about that do well. Many times we have rooms that have very low light, or we're in an office space, if we're in a cubicle, or if we are in a office with no windows or anything, like in Kathleen's case, she does not have a window in her office to provide anything extra. This is kind of a set of plants that might be better along with the supplemental lighting. So there's some lists there. One of my favorites is the cast iron plant, the Aspidistra. It's a plant that was used a long time ago. The reason why I got its name, the bar plant, is a common one, was that they used to be in bars. If you think of Cheers, the environment of a smoky, dark bar environment, this poor plant could deal with that low light. It could deal with cigar butts. It could survive old mixed drinks and old beer, and it'll still keep going. So that's why it's called the cast iron plant. And so it's a wonderful one. So that is great to work with. So there's some other ones, the Hartley philodendron. I have a philodendron back here that's draping over the corner of my cabinet up here, and it's loving it. We used to have those in college where we could literally trail them up around the corners of our walls. So literally make the run all the way around. So from one wall to the next, we just pin it up and let it keep going. So that's a lot of fun. The snake plant is also known as the mother-in-law's tongue because it has the really sharp edge. So if you've ever heard of mother-in-law's tongue, that's another name for the snake plant or the Sansevieria. So there's some great ones. Also the pothos, and we tend to confuse pothos and philodendrons together, but the pothos is also known as the devil's ivy. It doesn't have that curl that helps us identify. We have one that's called Marble Queen with enough lighting. It has the variegation, the marbling comes out and is beautiful. So that's kind of a light indicator plant. So if you're in a really low light area, the pothos, in that case, Marble Queen, will be, the surface of that leaf will be green because it's using up all of its space to pull in light in those low light situations. You get that Marble Queen in a more lighted area, then you'll start to see the variegation. So that's kind of a neat little trick with that one. The next one are your requiring more than 4 hours of direct sun or bright indirect light. This is where the croton comes in. The croton is a very popular plant to see from florists. It's a popular funeral plant to send to the funeral home. or to the funeral service, and people have a horrible time struggling with it at times because they just don't get it in the right space. So east light is actually the best light in exposure wise, but south and west also work well, just not direct. It needs to be bright indirect. So sometimes that's a challenge depending on how your windows are oriented in your home and how the light is coming in. So that's maybe where we need to get that supplemental light in there. So jade plants are fun. You can pop them off. You can start new plants fairly easy. African violets, and I will refer you to Scott Evans, who is a big African violet fan, who raises beautiful African violets and gesneriads. So that's great. And of course, the Christmas cactus. Christmas cactus is the rounded filiclade, not the ones with the claws. The ones with the claws are also, those are the Thanksgiving cacti. So those like bright, indirect sun. And so in my case, I pull mine out, for instance, out of the office, and then they go under the front porch where I have a nice deep front porch. They get lots of bright light, but it's not direct. And that's when they really take off and look great and are happy. And then I bring them back into my office and I have to bring the supplemental light in. So those are some tables for you to look at. Next slide. These are the ones that direct bright light, 4 hours or more. So that's really important. These are the ones that really like a lot of light. There's lots of choices here. You'll see the Dracaena or the corn plant in here, the dumb cane, which is Dieffenbachia. That's another popular house plant that you will see. You'll see the Rex begonia, Norfolk Island pine, because we have people that have the Norfolk Island pines. You buy those during the holiday season. Fiddle leaf fig. So think of that picture several slides back that John had that showed where the fiddle leaf fig should be. That's that kind of plant in this case that needs to be close to that bright window. So think about those plants that need to go that way. So we do have some different philodendrons in here. The fiddle leaf, you have the self-heading, you have the climbing ones. Those are a different one than the heart-shaped one that I have here that takes less light. You also have the Nephitis. The Nephitis is also known as the arrowhead plant. That's another common one that you will pick up at a greenhouse or a nursery, and you'll see it just kind of just spread out and kind of fall apart when it does not get enough light. People put them on desks and they're nowhere near the light source they need, and so they really struggle. So next slide. So this is one that's really important. I picked this up from a popular publication from the University of Georgia Extension that I like to reference, is the angle of the sun changes when we go from summer to winter. So our angle on the sun in the summer is a much higher angle. It's the way we're oriented from sun and winter, summer and winter in North America. So when we have the light, when it comes to winter, it's at a lower angle, and you can see how it penetrates in at a different angle. And so it's really good to see the differences, that they're not the same. And so things may have to be moved down around so we can get them to the right angle. So we have to do a little bit of playing. So yes, you're going to maybe have to move some of these plants to make them successful from summer to winter. So that's a good little trick to know. But this is a great, easy to explain visual picture for you to see that the light does change in the angle that it comes in. Okay. So window exposure, the best exposure is usually your eastern window exposure. It has generally the best light, and the temperature controls does not have the massive swings of temperature. So that's one of the nice ones when people talk about, I've got a plant, it's doing well in its spot, and they say, don't move it. That's exactly what John was talking about, because it's found its place that it is thriving in. And those east windows sure are nice. They're they have that nice combination. So kind of a win-win for many of our plants. So northern exposure is the most indirect. And if you have an overhang on the north, then it's really indirect. It's really cut back. It's a cooler temperature, so your cooler plants are a good choice to go there that don't require that tropical heat. So that's a great choice. The southern is the largest exposure and it has the largest set of variations. So you can have lots of good light coming out of a southern window. If you have an overhang, it automatically bumps it back to something more of a northern exposure because of the angle that that sun comes in. If you have an overhang, it's cutting it back. So that makes the difference. Southern and western exposures generally are pretty interchangeable from one to the other. And the west can vary in temperature as well. Okay. So supplemental lighting. It would be good to get a light meter and check to see how many lumens you have in your area, what is naturally in that area. So if you have your heart set on a plant in a specific spot in the house or a specific spot in the room, check the lumens. Those little light meters are not expensive. Those are a nice little option that helps you do the homework ahead before you buy the plant. But usually it's the opposite way around. We usually buy the plant and try to make it grow somewhere. So the light meters are nice. We can supplement as we need. So know your high, your low, medium, and high based off of the criteria that we've shown you with the pictures and the window exposures. And you can do the LEDs, which are your mix of your blues and your greens mostly. So if you need to look at lights, always look at that pattern on the box. Here's a box of one that has blue and red in here. We notice that there's no green in this box. So this one is for growing. This is a hydroponic one. So it's great for that. I do have the ability to fudge a little bit because I do have a nice western window in my office. But it can be, the lights can be turned off. Interior light from office lights are pretty poor in general to begin with. So I do have my supplemental lights here that I do turn on as I need. It's good to place them 6 to 12 inches from the plant because, as John said, as you spread from that further foot, that light just really just goes away really, really quick. So even though the light is on and it's farther away, you're not getting a lot of impact off of that. So one of the things that I do tell people that is a relatively inexpensive choice, I found this light. This is a desk lamp on a garage sale here in town in North Platte. And you can buy grow lights that are able to be installed in a desk lamp. And so here's that hydroponic light, for instance. So it would be best to have one that has the green exposure, but sometimes I'm really limited as to what's available in my hometown. So you can buy those better light bulbs usually online and bring them in. You can also put these on timers. You can do the regular timer that you put into an outlet, or like John just said, put into one on your phone where it controls how much light you need. So we usually talk about having 12 to 14 hours of light supplementing to go. And it's good to turn them off because we need 6 hours of dark. So we don't want the lights on all 24 hours. We want to have that mixed on. So we need to have the lights on. We need to have at least 6 hours off. Okay. Here's a picture of an old light stand. This is from the University of Missouri Extension that shows you the old style of tube lighting. You can get tube lighting that now is the LED. So that's something you can convert. So we can convert some of these light fixtures over to those better light bulbs that are better quality for us. But I wanted to show you that years ago, people were still doing this, and this is one of those old-fashioned fixtures that still works. You can convert those light fixtures to put in the better light bulbs for supplement. Okay. Humidity. This is a big one, especially out in western Nebraska where it was already dry to begin with. We were already below 20% humidity, and now we turned on our furnaces to beat the cold. So we're down in the single digits. It's extremely dry. So, and we put a poor tropical house plant in that came right out of a nursery. What a shock it's going to feel. So think about low, medium, and high, meaning low is below 20%. Medium is 40 to 50%. And how many of us have a home that's 40 to 50% humid with 40 to 50% humidity indoors? Because especially during the winter, the heat turns on and it just takes the humidity out. High is 50% and above. And that's why John has that big 4,000 square foot humidifier in, and that's how he's keeping those beautiful plants going with that humidity. So that's what's really a challenge, because we're not in the same environment as a greenhouse. A greenhouse is usually 50% or higher. And so we have to do some supplemental changes to the humidity level. So here's some graphs that'll explain humidity for us. So if you look at our top here, we're at 70 degrees Fahrenheit, which is a normal temperature in a home, 65 to 70. So if we have relative humidity at 10%, look at all the water vapor that's going out. So it's really low. We got to get this turned around. We get that humidity up. We get it up to 50, where we say it needs to be high. Look how much we have reduced water loss and vapor. So that's really important. If we are at 90%, so if we're in a really warm environment and the humidity level is at 50%, look at all the water vapor coming out of it versus 70 degrees. So if we have a 70-degree environment, humidity at 50, it's not nearly as much. And so we wanted to show you the difference between moisture loss with humidity percentages and temperature, because they do go hand in hand. And that's once again in that publication from the University of Georgia Extension. So what can you do? So here's some things that we can already talk about, grouping together by light needs. John showed us a beautiful example of that. John's showing you the example behind him. We're grouping the plants so they can help work together on their collective humidity levels. So that's super. So we can also do the shallow pan with the pebbles in it and fill it with water and just replenish that water, so that water is evaporating and the plants are pulling it up, you know, pulling that straw we're talking about, just sucks it right on in. So that's a good little trick. John, do you have any of that going on in your environment behind you?
I have some. So I have nursery pots inside of like decorative pots. And usually they don't go all the way to the bottom, so that there's some water below, so that's not sitting in water, but it does raise the humidity.
And that's the idea. The plant's going to sit on that layer of pebbles or with the water, so that humidity can climb right on up. So you can use a humidifier depending on the size of the room. So if you have a large room, you need a sizable humidifier or a full room humidifier. That can work. I'm going to show you my little humidifier here. I am in a small office space, and so this is my humidifier that fills in. It does, and it runs while I'm in the office, and it empties out really quick. So this is a dry environment, so I'm constantly refilling it. And one thing that you might want to think about when you're using water to fill a humidifier, it's best to use drinking water, reverse osmosis water, or distilled water, because especially out here on this half of the state, but also on eastern Nebraska, we have a lot of high mineral content in our water, and it'll lime things up. So I just go and I buy the bottled water and fill my little humidifier in here. So the plants get that humidity. You can mist with a sprayer with a little hand pump bottle. And you used to see people doing that, where they would go out and spray their plants. That used to be kind of a really popular thing, and you'll see pictures of those in the 70s especially, but that's only a temporary thing. So if you do this diligently, you're going to be doing this a couple times a day, every day. And some people do that, and that's great, but it has to be on the right plants, because our plants that have hairy leaves, that have the hairs, that have the pubescence, can trap that moisture, and it can trap spores that are on the surface of the leaf and cause spore development and disease. So be careful of that. Scott would tell you that also with all the philodendrons and the gesneriads, because they do have that pubescence, and so it's got to be really light. So a humidifier is a better choice than spraying, especially if it's cold water. You do not want to put cold water on any type of mist on plants, because you don't want the water to be cooler than the surface area of the leaf. So here's two examples I wanted to show you. There's the tray with the gravel or the pebbles that you fill with water just to the top of those pebbles, and then put your plants on top of that, and they'll pull that up, and then it's great. You just pour some at the edge again and refill that to that correct level. And so the other pictures from the University of Illinois, where you are grouping some plants together and working off of that humidity. But John's real life example is much prettier than the picture we put in. But just some good examples of working that together. Temperature and light go hand in hand, because we have the photosynthesis that we need from light. We need to be able to go through light. We need to pull in the carbon dioxide and the light and the water vapor to go through photosynthesis to provide the sugars and the starches for the plants to grow. Then we also have to have the temperature right, because we need to go through respiration and for the release of those sugars for the plant to grow. So we got to have that match. So the bottom is our worst case scenario, low light place where we're not going through photosynthesis very efficiently, and we have a high temperature, so we're burning up what little we're making. And so that can really retard growth in the plant and can lead to death. The next thing is just a simple recommendation. So if you have it set at 68 daytime, it's really good to have that 10-degree difference, or what we call diff, for the evening time. So if we can go down to that 65, the 68 to 58, that would be awesome. So what can you do? So let's measure the temperature by that window. What's the temperature? It's not going to be 68 degrees as on the thermometer on the thermostat. So do a little checking with the temperature, see what the temperature is, and check it during the day and check it during the night. And then, is there a 10-degree difference? We have lots of difference. If you have a window, it may cool or it may heat. So there's going to be some differences there. You can play with that 10-degree diff and measure that. It's really good. Also check your thermostat settings. You can program your thermostats now to do that, so you don't have to go to the thermostat and turn it down. You can play with your phone and you can change your thermostat setting. So there's timers, there's apps on your phones. So there'll be lots of great info, little tricks on setting that, so you don't have to get up to do that. Got the technology to change it, so makes the plants happier too. Okay, next slide. Okay, here's our resources. We have the GROBigRed blog, which we're working on and offering programs, and we're so glad to have people from all across the United States and in Canada and beyond. We're so glad that you joined us today. We have our YouTube channel that you can look. It's go.unl//GROBigRed tube. And then the two neb guides, or with the neb guide from Nebraska, Guide to Growing Houseplants, and then the publication Growing Indoor Plants with Success from the University of Georgia.